Okay, mystery solved. Let's get a beer.
So again, we're just gonna like delve deeper and deeper into the weird outlandish theories.
Yes.
The next weird outlandish theory is mermaids.
Can I stop for a second?
Yeah.
And just everybody, including our listeners, I was reading this story and going through this, and I got so excited I threw my arms in the air and I shouted in my house, "It's Cthulhu and the Killer Mermaids!"
Yes,
which I think is a great band name.
I think so too.
That would be good, yeah. So obviously, I mean, mermaid voices are kind of high pitched. You know, they had that siren song thing that they used to lure mariners to their death or something like that. I'm thinking of the sirens anyway, so forget that. But anyway, but they don't have those kind of deep throaty voices. So if it was mermaids, no. You have to assume, and I think this is fair, that they built an enormous gong and they were whapping it with their tails in unison.
Well, so that actually that brings up my biggest problem with the mermaid theory, aside from the like mermaids exist part, right? Is that mermaids are ostensibly about human size, and if a humpback whale can't make a noise loud enough to travel more than 800 kilometers, how's a mermaid gonna do it? I mean, maybe some kind of technology, but then why aren't we picking up like way more of these things, right?
Yeah, there's a problem with that one to me.
Me too.
Yeah.
So, okay, next outlandish, awesome theory is that it was transdimensional travel. Somebody
that again.
entering or leaving our dimension deep below the sea.
What is that based on?
I think the theory that if you were going to travel transdimensionally, it would rip a loud hole in whatever fabric of time-space we have, and that might be a loud thing.
Okay. But
that's literally all.
That's all you found?
That's all I found. Did you find more?
I'm always like,
I thought you were making that up at first.
No.
Okay.
So there's that.
All right.
Traveling a little back into the more valid theories are...
Oh, they're valid theories?
Well, a few. That it would be what's called a USO, an unidentified submerged object.
Okay.
So like a UFO, right? But it's a USO.
Potentially alien.
So it could be of alien of nature.
Or some Black Ops sub that we don't know about that's being tested or something like that.
Which is my next theory, which is Soviet Russia.
So specifically Soviet Russia.
Soviet Russia.
Doing what, exactly?
No, it probably wasn't Soviet Russia. It was in the 90s.
Yeah, they were kind of gone by that time.
But it could have been a bomb. I mean, it probably wasn't. The analysis says it wasn't. But those people are also paid by the Navy. So
True.
They may be saying, no, it doesn't sound anything like a bomb. You guys are crazy. Mm-hmm. But it was actually a bomb detonating. That would be, kind of the place in the sea where you would want to detonate a bomb. There's not a whole lot of
there's nothing there, really.
And freeze.
Well, that is one thing that our Navy, and have to assume the Soviets, the Russians, have been experimenting around with is active sonar. And we've had active sonar for many decades. But submarines don't actually use it. It's been because it gives away your position.
What is active sonar?
Well, active sonar is whenever you're watching the movies or TV and they show a submarine, you hear that ping noise. Mm-hmm. That's active sonar. And so active sonar is when you send out a burst of energy. And it can be generated by your sonar electronically, or it can be generated by an explosion. They get an echo that way. But active energy, and then you get a return signal, and that allows you to localize your opponent, another submarine.
Okay.
Typically, submarines don't use that. They use passive sonar, which is they only use their hydrophones. And they never use their active sonar because it would give away your position. It's like looking for somebody in a dark field in the middle of the night with a flashlight. They're going to see your flashlight long before your flashlight picks them up. And so the problem with passive sonar, it's been very effective. It's used not only by submarines but also by the SOSUS nets to detect all kinds of objects out there. But the problem is that submarines are getting much quieter, and they're now considering the problem of how do we, if they get to the point where our hydrophones can't reliably pick up enemy subs, how are we going to find them? And so they're returning to the idea of active sonar. The idea would be very powerful active sonars in your own submarine, or an energy source that's not actually localized in your submarine that transmits a lot of energy, and basically it's like setting off a flash, like a flash bulb in a huge dark room. They get this big flash of energy, and suddenly it's all illuminated, and you can see who's there. And so they have been experimenting with this kind of stuff. So it's conceivable that we're talking some sort of like massive active sonar experimentation.
I guess that's true. Yeah. That somebody just miscalculated where all these microphones were, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just were
or if it went farther than they planned that it would be able to go.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense if it were giant and it went off. That would hit all of those mics at about the same time. It would be really fast.
Yep.
Okay, I'm buying into this theory.
Yeah,
I'm getting there. And here I thought I had it figured out.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
It's okay.
But I mean, it's like again, it's like I had no idea the exact strength of with their active sonar experiments that the Navy has been doing, the exact strength of the signal they've been sending out. Mm-hmm. Something that massive would send what it's hard to say if there's a point to sending out something that huge, because after all, you're not trying to identify targets 1,000 miles away.
Right.
You're trying to identify targets, 20, 50 miles away.
Sure.
If that even.
Do you guys have any other theories you want to talk about before I drop the bomb on this whole thing? No? All right.
No,
here's my
can't
bomb.
Think of anything else.
I'm sorry to tell you, I've brought a mystery that they're pretty sure is solved.
They're pretty sure.
I think that it's these people who are in charge of these systems.
These people who are in charge of covering things up.
Well, if you want to go the conspiracy theorist route, which at this podcast we try to keep an open mind to all possibilities.
Yeah.
The people who are telling us what has happened here are also the people who are in charge of telling us everything that's happening, and the Navy's paying them, and intelligence agencies are paying them, and so
there could be a finger in the pie issue.
There could be, as Joe was just saying, it could have been a massive sonar blast, something like that. But there's this guy named Robert Dizek. He's a seismologist at the Oregon State University, but he also works for the NOAA.
Okay.
And he said the bloop was an ice quake.
An ice quake?
Yeah.
Is it like instead of tectonic sheets shifting, it's ice sheets shifting and grinding against one another?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So
an ice quake.
And here's the thing, is that Julia was an iceberg that ran aground in Antarctica. The train was probably generated by a really large iceberg grounding in the Ross Sea. The slowdown was moving ice in Antarctica. The whistle's hard. It was detected off, kind of more in the northern Pacific area. And they don't have an ice-related theory for it. Although we were listening to it, and it just does kind of sound like wind, like a high current or something like that. Although one would assume that this is what these people listen to all the time. If it were just a current,
they would know how to eliminate that.
The upsweep, it turns out, they hear a lot. And it's seasonal. And they think it's ice melt.
Ah.
All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and rail against this because, correct me if I'm wrong, all but one of these so far that we've gone over were all detected in the southern hemisphere, right?
Yeah.
Okay. SOSUS is in the northern hemisphere as well,
it's all
right?
Over.
So far, it's about 5-6 times. But icebergs do stuff and ice shifts constantly, so why have we not heard these before and continue to hear them, and why aren't they in the north?
Yeah.
So that's my problem, because I read the ice theory and it was okay, it's justifiable. It makes sense. I can see it being a viable solution, except it only happens in one hemisphere, and it's only been recorded in these couple of times.
I don't, that's a valid point, but, you don't know exactly which arrays researchers have been granted access to, maybe not necessarily all of them.
Oh, wait, so researchers don't have access to everything that SOSUS picks up? Is that correct?
My impression is that they do have access to all of that stuff, but I will say that apparently that they have picked up sounds really spectrographically similar to the bloop.
Okay.
Not quite as loud, but similar in their range and tone and all that stuff. they've been doing this constantly. I mean, in 2000, they picked one up that was near Georgia, and they actually got to watch the iceberg like sink into right where the array was. And, they seem to kind of be picking this stuff up. The only thing is that the magnitude is ginormous compared to what they pick up usually. And, maybe it was just a really big iceberg.
I guess I could see if it was a series of abnormally warm seasons and things are starting to shear for some, and I hate to say it, but global warming is the term everybody throws out. But if there's some temperature fluctuations going on, okay, I can see that being possible, but it just still seems weird to me that we suddenly had so many in such a short period of time and they've never really heard it before. That's a big question mark for me.
But if you think about a large number of arrays and massive amounts, years of data, and you have to sift through the data, because this is not something that the Navy's not going to pick this stuff up probably, because they're not listening at these incredibly low frequencies. Mm-hmm. They're listening for the sounds of submarines and stuff like that. So it might be this stuff has been going on for years, and the Navy guys who've been listening to it for all this time haven't really picked up on it because they're not really interested in those frequencies.
And, I'm about to ask something really horribly silly, but when did the Cold War finally end?
1989, I think.
The first sound that we have that was recorded was in 1991, which would have been about when they were getting around to actually getting to use these arrays, right? I mean, the war doesn't end and then immediately they're like, actually, let's give the scientists all this data. It takes a year or two.
Well, yeah, but all this has happened around the turn of the century, and is there any more that they've talked about that have happened in recent years?
Nope.
And maybe that's because they haven't had enough time to sift through all that data, as Joe was saying. But I still,
a lot of data. But
I don't want to sound, as if I'm throwing a conspiracy, but it seems hinky to me that that's the exact answer that we've got.
Yeah, I agree. The thing to add on to that is that this guy, Dr. Fox, right? He said, yeah, it was an ice quake. And then he said, oh no, actually it's an animal. And then a bunch of other people were like, no, it was an ice quake. No, it's totally an ice quake. No, dude, it's an ice quake.
Do you think... go ahead.
Who knows what they're...
Is it possible that Dr. Fox and all these other people are servants of Cthulhu? And... yeah,
maybe
they're helping in the cover-up.
Yeah,
it could be the Cthulhu cover-up. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Well,
but my answer to which is a valid point that you make. But my answer would be that it's just they haven't maybe gotten around to sifting through that data yet. And they might not have been given access to some of the northern hydrophone networks too.
That's my big question. Yeah,
you don't know what networks they've been allowed to get data from.
And you're right. You're right on that. It just still, like I said, something smells a tad off. And I'm not saying that it's not the right answer. It just not everything's there for me to put the puzzle together.
I agree with you.
I'm not convinced.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure at least one of our listeners is working for the Navy and listening on the SOSUS network. So if you know what SOSUS arrays civilians are being allowed access to and which ones they're not, please clue us in.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That'd be great.
We'll be giving you our email at the end of the show.
That seems like a perfect segue to me, unless anybody else has anything else to say.
No.
Well, then, if you do have that information, please email us at thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. Visit our website, it's thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can find links to this story, any additional information we feel like providing you with. You can leave us a comment. And of course, you can listen to us on the website. You're probably listening to us on iTunes, but we're on Stitcher now, so definitely give that a check. If you're on the go, you don't feel like downloading it or whatever, you can stream it straight through your Stitcher app. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, so thanks for listening. Let us know if you have anything you want to tell us, or if you have any ideas for shows, because we love suggestions.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do love the listener suggestions.
Yeah.
And if you have top secret underwater, hydrophone network information for us, please send it along.
And keep blooping.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hello there. Welcome again to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I'm Joe, joined as always by
Devin?
And
Steve.
And as you know, if you've never listened to us before, what we do is we solve unsolved mysteries. We find a mystery, we pound it into the ground until it finally cries, "No mas, no mas!" And then we tell you how to find us on Stitcher and iTunes and stuff.
He's lying.
Yeah.
That's the worst description of the show I've ever heard.
In some episodes, we haven't solved anything.
Well, we solved a few. We solved Lost Boy Larry.
No, we didn't solve that one.
I think we did.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, according to Joe, we've solved them all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not actually what happens.
Okay, but occasionally we'll shed a little bit of ray of light on something. You know, we might add something to it. Okay, well, so let's move ahead here. Let's talk about our weekly mystery here. The mystery is the Count of Saint Germain. Woohoo! I know some of you may have heard of this guy.
I've heard of the liquor. Saint Germain.
This show this idea was actually a listener suggestion. Unfortunately, it was suggested by a whole bunch of listeners and not just one. And so usually we give acknowledgement, but in this case we're not going to.
You know who you are.
Yeah.
You know who you are, and thanks a lot.
And I would say fortunately, not unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good one.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So the Count of Saint Germain, nobody knows precisely when he was born. Some sources say 1710, some 1712, some say 1690, some say before Christ. He was a European dude who claimed he was the son of Prince Francis II Rákóczi, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, of Transylvania. He was prominent in high society in the 18th century, particularly in France, but in other places too. He hobnobbed with a lot of famous people, including Kings Louis XV and Louis XVI of France, Voltaire, you probably heard of him, Giacomo Casanova, you've heard of Casanova, I'm sure.
Yep.
And in fact, Casanova mentions the Count in his memoirs.
He does.
He does. And also Catherine the Great of Russia, and lots of other people. Supposedly he spoke lots of languages very fluently, and he played the violin and the harpsichord like a master. He wrote opera songs and stuff like that. I mean, the guy was what's the word I'm thinking of? Polymath. The guy was like, kind of like Benjamin Franklin, some of those guys, and just geniuses at all kinds of different things. He knew a lot about science and philosophy, and Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel, that's in Germany apparently, said that he was, quote, one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived, unquote. What else? He was into alchemy, and he claimed to have had great success. He claimed to have, invented all kinds of little powders that would make you immortal and stuff like that.
So basically he was kind of like the full package.
I know, and yeah. Great conversationalist, charming fellow. Lots of people reported, hanging with him and enjoying his company a whole lot. He was apparently rich, never short on cash.
Which is why people hung out with him.
Yeah, probably. Although
Yeah.
the people he was hanging out with were royalty, and so they weren't hurting for cash either.
True.
Oddly, no one, or at least very few people, ever saw him eat any food. He would have dinner with people, and he would just spend the whole time talking and not eat a single thing.
Did he drink?
I don't know.
Presumably
Presumably he did.
I remember something about him drinking a special tea.
Yeah.
That was noted in some of the writings, but that was the only thing I ever saw.
Yeah, he supposedly invented something called Russian tea. But, he also apparently abstained from sex. He didn't, even though women found him very, very charming, he didn't actually pursue women or have a wife or a girlfriend or anything like that. He also was rumored to have been a member of some secret societies like the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Knights Templar, and some other ones.
All the big ones?
All the big ones, all the big scary ones, the Illuminati and stuff
like that. The big three.
Yeah, I know. And it seems to me that he played a fairly major part in shaping European politics in the 18th century. But his biggest claim to fame is for being immortal.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, if not immortal, very long-lived.
Extremely long-lived, yeah. As I said earlier, his date of birth was put at around 1710, maybe 1712. Accounts vary. Nobody really knows. And the count was notoriously hard to pin down on stuff like that. He didn't exactly say when he was born or where he was born or anything. It was only later in life that he told Prince Charles of Hesse-Cassel that he was the son of Prince Francis II of Transylvania. But other than that, he tended to evade questions about his origins. But there were people who said that they knew him in 1710, and at the time he was around 45 years old. Yeah. Yeah, I know. And there, another guy who's called Baron von Stolch, said that he knew the count between the years 1715 to 1723, and he was about 45 then. And in 1735, a guy named Monin, a French guy, saw him in Holland. Apparently had seen him at some time in the far previous past, like 1710. It's reported he hadn't aged a day at that time. So
that's odd.
That's kind of strange.
Was he the original Benjamin Button? Is that he was just aging backwards?
It could have been that. Yeah.
I think he was in stasis, not aging backwards. It's not like, I haven't seen you in 20 years and you look younger. It's, wow, you look exactly the same.
You know, it's probably one of those Portrait of Dorian Gray kind of dealios, or so made a pact with the devil kind of thing.
Or just Keanu Reeves.
Could be Keanu Reeves. Yeah, I know. Quick aside here, he went by a lot of different names, which was not unusual at the time, apparently. Some of his aliases were the Marquis de Montferrat, Count de Bellemare, Chevalier Schöning, Count Velden, Count de Saltikoff, Graf Zargrochi. Okay, let's do that again.
A lot of consonants.
Yeah, Graf Zargrochi and Prince Rakoczy, and I mispronounced most of those, I'm sure. Yeah,
you did.
It looks like the rumors of his immortality, nobody can say exactly when they seem to have started, but they may have begun in 1760 in Paris. A certain Countess von Georgi had known the Count in Venice in 1710, apparently. And when she met him again, she was amazed to see that he hadn't aged at all, and asked him if it was his father that she had known in Venice. And he said no, that it was he who had known her. And apparently he was able to discuss in enough detail with her what the things that they had done together in Venice, that she was convinced.
That it wasn't him just saying, oh, no, yeah, that was me.
No, he recounted conversation and events and stuff that they had seen together.
Yeah, and she was amazed and said she couldn't quite believe it. And he just said, Madame, I am very old. So maybe it was. So I'm going to go through his life a little bit here. He traveled a lot. In the years 1737 to 1742, he was in Persia studying alchemy. Yeah, and then when he returned, he went to Versailles.
Well, and when he was in Persia, he was good friends with the Shah at the time.
Supposedly, he hung with the Shah. Yeah, the Shah.
So again, he's hobnobbing with the elite of wherever he's at.
Well, yeah, wherever he goes, he seems to work his way right in. In the mid-1740s, he lived in England for a while. He was arrested in 1745 on suspicion of espionage, but they didn't have anything to really hold him on, so they let him go. And who knows, he might have been spying. He showed up in France in about 1748 and worked his way into the court of Louis XV. And Louis XV would send him on diplomatic missions.
So, maybe. He might have been a spy.
Yeah, he could have been a spy. I mean, diplomats always, often do spy.
Yeah, those two are kind of synonymous with each other.
Especially at that day and age.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Less now, technically.
Technically. Supposedly.
Supposedly.
Well, there's still plenty of people in the embassy who are spies, but not all of them are.
Evidently.
Yeah. In 1755, he went to India. In 1760, during the 7 Years' War, he went to Holland, where he tried to open peace negotiations, supposedly, between Britain and France. The British ambassador wouldn't deal with him unless he had credentials that came directly from Louis XV.
Now, which war was it that was going on at that time?
The 7 Years' War.
Okay, I couldn't remember exactly which one, but he was there, 2 or 3 years into the war?
Yeah, I think about
it hadn't reached its full title of 7 years. At that point.
No, at that point in time, it was about halfway, so maybe 4 years in, I think, and it was destined to go on a little bit longer.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I actually learned something interesting recently, which is that the French and Indian War, you've heard about?
Wow.
Yeah, it was actually part of the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War actually...
How?
Basically, the 7 Years' War was a clash between miscellaneous European powers that took place all over the world. Some of the clashes took place in Europe. Some took place in North America and Central America. There were all kinds of battlefields in the 7 Years' War, which I had not known. I've got to read a book about the war because
I was going to say. So basically, if their forces ran into each other, they immediately started fighting.
Yeah.
They're like brothers in a bar, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. So yeah, the 7 Years' War. I am going to read a book about that and get back to you guys. At this time, there was a certain plotter whose name I'm not going to try to. It was the Duc de Choiseul. The Duc de Choiseul. Choiseul is French for hazard, so the Duke of Hazard. So this schemer, this plotter, the Duke of Hazard, convinced Louis XV to disavow Saint Germain and request his arrest and extradition by the Dutch. The Dutch saw this as just internal French politicking, and they didn't really want to get involved in it.
So they saw it for what it was.
Yeah, pretty much.
A bunch of BS.
Yeah. So instead of extraditing him back to France, they got the British ambassador to Holland to issue the Count a British passport.
Which they called it a blank passport?
Yeah, they gave him a blank passport so he could fill in any name he wanted to.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? I wish I could do that.
You didn't have to have it wasn't like it was issued and it had a photograph in it and all of that. It just said who you were. You could steal somebody's for all I know, and they would accept it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy.
Also crazy is, right, Britain was like, oh, hey, we're going to arrest you. Because
years later.
Yeah, and then years later, here's actually just a blank passport.
Yeah. I know.
We're over it.
Well, people were more relaxed back then. Yeah. I read, and apparently this is true. I read the books, the Master and Commander series by Patrick. What's his name? The film Master and Commander.
Right.
Yeah, and they're very authentic recreations of that period in history during the Napoleonic Wars. And his they get captured. Our heroes and the crew get captured by the French, and the French let them go but just said, you have to promise not to take part in any more fighting in the war, and we'll let you go. We won't keep you captive. And so they said, okay. And they honored the request. They didn't take part in any more battles. They just kicked back and watched the war go on around them. So things were just a little bit different back then.
Yeah, I can't see that happening today.
I don't either.
No, not quite. Okay, that was an annoying aside. I apologize. So he, on his blank passport, got to travel to Britain and escape the clutches of Louis XV and all of the court intrigues there.
Great.
Yeah, nice. Okay, 2 years later, he goes to Russia, where supposedly he knew Catherine the Great, and he was involved in a conspiracy to overthrow Tsar Peter III and place Catherine the Great on the throne. And apparently that did happen.
It did happen. It
He
worked.
was involved. Supposedly, he also later advised the commander of the Imperial Russian armies in their war against Turkey.
So among everything else, he's a great strategist.
Apparently.
I mean, because he's figuring out how to maneuver political stuff around, as well as armies and forces on the field of battle.
I guess some could argue to a suspicious degree.
Yeah.
Right? That it almost seems less that he is good at strategy and more that he just knows what's gonna happen.
That's possible.
Little prescient. Is that the correct word?
That's it. He did make some predictions. He made all kinds of interesting predictions, and a lot of which came true. Yeah. But we're going to talk about that in the theory.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't mean to jump ahead.
Okay. Oh, no worries. In 1774, he returned to France. Louis XVI was now in power, along with Marie Antoinette. He allegedly, at this point, warned them that a revolution was to come about 15 years in the future.
Y'all know how that ended.
Yeah, that did not end well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that went on for a good 10 years.
Yeah, it did.
It did not end well for a lot of people that were previously in power.
And a lot of other people besides. So blood flowed freely, let's just say.
It really did.
I was here for liberty, egalite, fraternité. Yeah. Okay.
Still happening, apparently.
Yeah.
In this room.
In 1775, this is one source that I found, and I haven't seen this anywhere else, but this one.
Oh, yeah, I
claims,
remember this.
Yeah, he claims that the Count was in America, where he was known as the Professor, and supposedly he was involved with all of our revolutionary founding father guys. And in 1776, he supposedly gave a very stirring speech in Independence Hall to the assembled delegates who were about to sign the Declaration of Independence.
That sounds like somebody trying to prove that he's the doctor.
I was thinking the same thing and held back.
Sounds just like a Time Lord.
Yeah, but think about this, because, I mean, at the time, these guys were putting their names on what was a treasonous document. I mean, they were risking their lives.
Oh, absolutely.
And their fortunes by doing this. And apparently their morale was kind of so-so, so it might be the Count bucked up their morale sufficiently with his stirring speech that he actually caused that declaration to be signed and